So we're going live now. So if there's anybody that was super quick and got in now, we're just doing the tests. So bear with us. So if there's anyone in the chat, we're not 8 o'clock. I usually go at 8 o'clock. We're not 5 o'clock yet. So we're just doing the tests now. So if anyone can just let us know in the chat that you can hear us. Mícheál, you can have a little bit of a hello there as well, just so the chat can,
hello.
Good stuff. We're definitely live. So people in the chat, I will just always do this when we're starting, just yay or nay in the chat that you can hear us, then we will start. And I want to thank you for coming. Anybody that's in the chat or anybody that's watching right now, I think there's 4 people in. Thank you so much, Garamila Magwiv. Just let us know in the chat that you can hear us and we'll get started immediately. All you have to do is say yay or nay. Please and thank you. Just waiting for the confirmation on people being able to hear us, and then we'll get started immediately. Perfect, Adam. Good man yourself, Adam. Legend as always. Legend as always, my friend Adam. Okay, very, very welcome, Fáilte. Fáilte Macorja, thank you so much for coming to the live stream. We're not sure if Oasis won the battle tonight. Did Oasis win the crowd and they're all gone there instead of coming to this live stream? We're unsure, but maybe we did capture some of the Oasis crowd onto here, and we will see as the night progresses or as the evening progresses. But anyway, this is very exciting for me because myself and Mícheál know each other for a while from TikTok. We did a live stream on TikTok before on my channel. Mícheál is Clans and Dynasties, that's his brand, and he is an expert in surnames, you know, and Clans and Dynasties, just the overview of how all of this came to be in Ireland. And he's going to explain it a lot better than what I just explained there, because I just felt it was the most basic description of Mícheál and what he's doing ever. But that's why he's here tonight. So thank you, Mícheál. I just want to say in advance, because people sometimes wait till the end to do this, but I think it's important as content creators, we do it in advance. Make sure you support us and go to all our channels and make sure you're following there, you know, and supporting the videos, because without that, there's no incentive to do what we do. And also you can support me and Mícheál in various ways. That will be in the description afterwards. So you can go on to Mícheál's YouTube and TikTok. He's doing many live streams on TikTok, and also support his YouTube channel. He's got my favorite video is there's, look at Adam. He's already sending super chats because he's an absolute star. Adam, appreciate it, brother. Really appreciate it. So my favorite video from his YouTube channel is which clans fought at the Battle of Clontarf. Am I right? Is that the title of it, Mícheál?
Yes.
Yeah, that's how I got to know Mícheál, and he came onto my TikTok live stream at Christmas, not last one, the one before, I think. Yeah. And we got talking from there, and then that's how it all came to be, and that's why we're here tonight. So Adam has already sent a super chat, and if you really want to know something about your surname, you could send a super chat from around, we'll say about €2, we'll do it. And what we'll do is we'll stop every 10-15 minutes to do super chats if there's many super chats. And Mícheál would gladly answer. So that's the introduction done. I want Mícheál to introduce himself, give us a bit of a background, a bit of an introduction of how you got into this, how you became Clans and Dynasties Online, and anything else, and then we'll get started with the Q&A.
Yeah, so just want me to start now?
Yes, please. Yes, please. Head ahead.
I was a bit put on the spot, but yes, thank you very much for having me again. Yeah, like I said, I remember coming on to your live, that specific live. I'd sort of seen your stuff anyway, because TikTok was nice enough to show me your work through my For You page. So we obviously had some overlapping, talking points. And yeah, I remember coming onto your live, and you were like, "Is this the real Cons of Dynasties from the YouTube?" And yeah, I was like, "Yeah." I had no idea. Obviously, you even knew who I was, and from there's blossomed this beautiful friendship. But
Absolutely.
yeah, but I am the founder of Clans and Dynasties, and really my love of history. We kind of touched on it before the live, but it's a very prevalent point to raise, is that my interest in history, I've always been interested in history, but it was always Roman history, battles, Mesoamerican, like the Aztecs, the Mayans, as a young lad growing up. I didn't really have this sort of keen interest in Irish history, although every Irish household or people with an Irish background, and I'm sure with every country sort of has this, but you sort of have the little bits that are passed down, whether that be family lore or just I suppose the best one I have is there's a bunch of houses in a wee village in Tandragee, and every time we drive past them, my dad would go, "Your grandfather built them." And you know, those wee bits of information, those wee bits of history, I didn't probably realize at the time were probably forming part of my identity. We all, I suppose, subconsciously are always building a layer upon layer of our identity to become the adult we eventually become. And you know, how does that you know, who is me, I suppose, is the simple question that we would ask ourselves. You know, who am I even? And yeah, I suppose, but as I got older, I really wanted to know, well, I know who I am now. I sort of, I've got an idea who I am, but where do I fit in the story of human history? And I suppose that starts with local first. So, and the easiest way to do that is, you know, well, my surname. We're quite lucky in Ireland in that our surnames are very localized. It's easier than if you go to a country that doesn't have patronymic surnaming. That you know, it could be like Smith. We'll say people like who have the surname Smith may find it a little bit harder to be connected to the surname because it's just so many origin points, you know, and it's like, oh, well, you can't figure out where you fit. But, you know, most Irish people are blessed with the ability to almost find out the very village their ancestors came from. So, you know, because even our family surnames were given to local townlands, and, you know, so it was, and I wanted to find my one. Unfortunately, my surname is very much like Smith Doyle. It's a very generic surname. It has multiple origin points. A lot of it's shrouded in myth and legend, and it's not focused in one locale. But that then, instead of being defeated by that actually got me asking more questions. And before you know it, I'm reading about everyone's surname, because I'm just wondering, well, if I can't find out where my surname fits in the world of Irish history, how does everyone else's fit in Irish history? And I wonder if I can build up a bigger picture and figure out myself where my surname would fit. And that was the journey. I just a journey of self-discovery and love of my culture, my history. That started 20 years ago. Geez.
Can I just ask a quick question, just for the lay person in this, which is me? Just that word, I think I know what it means. I'm pretty sure. Patronymic, is it patronymic you said?
Yeah.
So can you just explain that for the audience and myself, please?
Yeah. So patronymic surname is effectively, I believe, the terminology is from like pater, so like father, the Latin word pater, and but effectively it's a surname that you gain from, so that the surnames can be mostly broke down into 4 origin points. You have locality surnames, so If you're from, you would understand as Brosnan from Brosna. If you're from a place like Belfast, Chester, whatever, you take that your ancestor took the name of that location as an identity marker. But patronymic is that we took their name, their first name, so Bertie or Mícheál. So my children would have gone, well, Mícheál's a great guy. He's done all these amazing deeds. I'm going to take his name as my surname, and that's how the patronymic surname works. So you take it, or it doesn't have to. But that's more when surnames form, or it just means that it's a look. It's just to say like, well, I am Mícheál's son of Sean, and then if you have a load of Mícheáls in the same village, you can use that to identify, which one you are, and maybe your relationship to that individual. So, but it just effectively means the name of your father, or and eventually ancestor, because terminologies change over time.
So I think that like leads us in nicely into the kind of the real origins. So like I have a couple of questions here for you, Mícheál, and if anything comes up naturally, we can get into it as well. When and how did surnames first begin in Ireland? And is it true we were the first country in Europe to adopt them?
Yeah, it's generally accepted like Ireland was among like the earliest countries in Europe to develop and adopt hereditary surnames. The evidence sort of suggests it's around the 10th century, and we're using the prefixes O, meaning descendant of, and Mac, meaning the son of. While the surname like originated in the 10th century, it's not really until the 13th century that surnames become widespread. And by the 16th century, the practice is firmly established. But as with every sort of trend in Europe, this is starting to happen everywhere. If we compare this development to like the rest of Europe, Ireland is obviously clearly early 10th century. France, they start to appear in the sort of later half, early 11th century. In England, we obviously, most people who understand English history know that most surnames come from the Norman Conquest, 1066, and that was to do with taxation primarily. And in Scotland, the process is even slower, with the Norman style surnames arriving in the 12th century, and Gaelic surnames not really being formalized as a surname. So they remained a patronymic system of just father, son, father, son, father, son, rather than having a wider surname. And in some cases, that didn't happen. In the McKinnons, it didn't even happen until the 18th century. So you can see how it starts in Ireland, or this formation starts on, but it's a natural progression that seems to be happening. Or Ireland didn't influence the rest of the Europe with this. It was a natural progression that seemed to be happening. It's just Ireland just seemed to adopt it first.
Well, it's interesting. What I find that quite interesting, because I did a bit of research before coming on and doing this with you. Of course, I have to, and it is interesting when I me, Mícheál, you know how I am about the what's happened in this country, and we all can identify with the looking back and seeing our history and seeing what happened here and stuff. And then this kind of propaganda that we hear a lot of the time, and Philip from Irish medieval history would be big into this, and there's many others as well, that we kind of tend to write ourselves off especially in our ancient past, and even in our recent past as well. We kind of write ourselves off, or we've been written off, a bunch of barbarians, as the Romans used to put it, and savages, But it's interesting to hear that we were one of the first to do this. You know what I mean? And it shows me that there was a civilized, although rudimentary and although basic enough, it was like there was someone, people saying we need to administer this properly so that we can take account of things, right? Am I on track here?
I think it was less about actually for Ireland. like in England, it's primarily for administration.
Yeah,
You know, William the Conqueror wants to find out how much what he owns. Now he's just taken over England, and why, you know, and how much he can get for, and then to help distinguish family, you know, today he's not taxing the same family twice and stuff like that. You know, he starts to, and he's already using a model that he's kind of taken from Normandy, France. So because he's aware of surnames by this, or the formation of sort of houses, as we would say. In Ireland, it's more to do, and I think it actually would lean more, and this may be more, I think, a bit of romanticism, but I think it's aired in a bit of truth in that it's more to do, it's more cultural in the sense of they're claiming it from ancestors. You know, it's like, and these ancestors tend to have had to have done great deeds or have been a
yeah,
king, or nobody's ad- adopting the surname. No higher authority is imposing a surname on
right.
the lower people so they can administer them. These lower people are taking on the surname. The same reason the nobility in Europe are taking surnames is it's this prestige, it's this history, it's this connection to something bigger. Um, and
And
I
actually, and Adam, who did super chat, he actually said, he kind of mentioned this in the comments. Can you see it there at all, Mícheál? Can you see it?
yeah,
You can't see it your end. So he said Mac and O is son of descendant of, isn't it? Is that what you're referring to there? That what that turned Mac and O kind of, it turned into Mac and O later on. But what you're saying is that it was a cultural thing. I am a descendant of, and that's the reason why I'm saying
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's obviously the terminology of Mackinac in its original formation is O is grandson, Mac is son.
yeah,
But then, and these are surnames, but they're not hereditary because they're not passed on. You know, Michael, son of Sean, so Michael McSean. That's a surname. That is my surname. McSean is my surname. But my children will not retain that name. They will go on to be, you know, Mac Mícheál or Mac Michael, or, you know,
mm,
or so it's that's the patronymic side of it. But then over time, the um the terminology and the way that we viewed it changed. So although it literally means in its literal translation, grandson of, it now means really descendant of. Um,
mm, mm.
because I'm not the you know, I'm not the grandson of Dubhghaill. I'm the descendant of Dubhghaill, and you're not the grandson of. So that's how I bet that's how the terminology changed. So, um, Adam is correct in its original form. Like, you know, McLaughlin, Larry McLaughlin. Like, he's not the son of Lachlan. He's the descendant of. So the terminology has changed in how we use the word. Um, but it's so both points are correct, but I
Mm.
suppose in a more modern sense, it's you know, the word doesn't mean what it literally used to mean.
Yeah, that brings us in nicely as well, just kind of leading into this whole Mac, right? The son of, because as you know, like I'm a Brian Boru man, and I know that you're more you more lean towards the O'Neills.
Well, that's a misconception. I love the email. I do. But my first Brian was my first love. You know, when it came to Irish history.
Oh, well, I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you said that now. That's how you're painted in much different light to me now after saying that.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think he's the most. Yeah, the fact everyone wants to hear about the king that united Ireland, and that's a very loose term, but we'll use it.
Yeah.
United Ireland, and I mean, you know, I suppose it's the same way that he's my William the Conqueror for English people. You know,
Mm,
he's that figure that starts it all for me.
mm.
And in my youth, you know, I would have said that he was the greatest king, you know, and this is where we'll diverge. But then obviously I learned more about the Eniel, and then I realized that we were far superior in Ulster.
Here, you're back. You're back into that box I had you before, the O'Neill box. But anyway, so the question is on that, and it kind of leads nicely into that, is how did Brian Boru and the Dalcash or the Dalcashians shape surname traditions, and did this trend start with them or the O'Neills? And just to preface why I'm asking that, I was under the impression that the O'Briens were one of the first to kind of really grab onto this, because they didn't want to let go of Brian Boru's certain name, because if they wanted they were using it to claim high kingship. So you can just maybe let us know about what your thoughts are on that from your research.
And it was something that I even mentioned, I believe, in my very first video about Brian Boru, and one of my old ones from like 2021, because it comes from, and I don't know if it comes from him personally, but he definitely purports it. It comes from the historian Geoffrey Keating. So you think it's a reliable source. You know that it's claimed that Brian Boru introduced surnames into Ireland in a more the same way that William the Conqueror did in England, but it's not correct. And in fact, the evidence actually suggests the opposite for his own immediate family, because the Dalcash dynasty, to which Brian belonged, didn't adopt hereditary surnames until the time of his great grandsons in the mid 11th century. So you can see how when you're met with this idea, because like I said, our surnames come from these great deeds, these great ancestors, and it's not until Dermot and Murchad are adopting the surname, much later, that you think to yourself, why is this, why did they not take his surname? Especially when the Dalcash and every other tribal group are using genealogy to legitimize their rise, their claims, their, the Dalcash spent so much time and effort under Brian's older brother of grafting their own genealogy onto the Oirnachta, instead of accepting the Daoise heritage, because it was for legitimization. That you would think that, okay, well, I'm Brian Boru's son or grandson, and I want to claim the throne of Ireland, and so I should use his name, but they don't, which is it kind of almost contradicts it. Oh, it does contradict it, but it's just it almost begs the question as to why. But it actually, when you look at surnames and how slow they are to form, and the reason behind it, and the terminology changing. So obviously, when Turla O'Brien takes the name, I believe Turla's his great grandson. When Turla O'Brien takes the surname O'Brien, or he's not even the grandson of, which is the O. He's not even the grandson of Brian. He's the great grandson. So the terminology has already started to change. On whether it means so it shows an understanding of this practice existing in Ireland. But yes, it does seem to be a myth, and I don't know where Geoffrey Keating got it from. I won't speculate, but it doesn't seem to be. There doesn't seem to be any evidence of the O'Briens encouraging it or enforcing it. But at the same time, they don't dissuade it. So maybe that's maybe that's the point he's trying to raise. But
and what about the O'Neills then? Like, because of their tie to nine of the nine hostages, and is that funny, kind of something?
Because they don't get the even though they're the O'Neill and they become the O'Neill. Well, one branch becomes the O'Neill. They don't take the name from Niall of Nine Hostages. So so by contrast, the O'Neill were among actually the very first dynasties to adopt hereditary surnames. A branch of the Southern O'Neill, who you would know very well, through Mícheál Ó Dubhghaill is Clan Coleman. And they take the surname, like the Mícheál Ó Dubhghaill, and it became O'Melaghlin, and then it's sort of become O'Mclaughlin now, or O'Loughlin. And they bore surnames very early. So they're adopting the surname in the 10th century, so just before the O'Briens.
Interesting.
And I believe actually they're taking the surname while Mícheál Ó Dubhghaill is still alive. They're using this as a surname. So they're already acknowledging their patronage to an individual who's still alive, whereas a lot of Irish families are adopting it after this certain individual has passed. But the Northern Mícheál, the separate branch of this wider king group, take their name from Niall Glundubh, who died in 916. But they, again, it's his great grandsons that are, or grandsons, it's around the same time as Turla that are adopting the O'Neill surname. So, it's a common misconception that it comes from the O'Neills come from Niall Nógallach, and they do in their traditional narrative descend from them, but they didn't take their name from that individual.
Interesting, and this leads nicely into, because Peter did send a super chat as well, and actually the next question was pretty much what Peter is asking here about the oldest surnames in Ireland, and I think the Clearys. I think a lot of people think it's the Clearys, right? Oh, Clearig or something like that.
Yeah, the Clearig. Yeah.
So Peter asks, was Cleary, Mac, and O the first commonly recognized Irish surname? I think he's referring to Cleary itself.
Yeah, I think he's some people, Adam's obviously a little bit more. Peter is probably a little bit more wiser to the fact that O and Mac can be put into any name. So
there you go.
That's
good man, Peter.
Yeah, so he's correct in the sense of saying you'll have McClearys and O'Clearys that descend from the same line. And that's another that I'm sure we'll kind of come into that later on in the conversation as we get it later into the surnames. But yeah, the Clearig are they're part of the Fiachra Anya, which is just north of Clare, so they would have known the Dalcash. In fact, if you on that wee map you have mentioned there, wherever it says the Lees and the McCaigs, just north of County Clare, is sort of their area of operation and their lands. But they are. If you go on any online sort of website, search, Google it, I don't know, Chat GPT it, what is the oldest surname? It's O'Cleary comes up with the first hit, and it appears in the annals in 923 as a early surname, but not a hereditary surname. So I think we need to make sure we're distinguishing between, a hereditary and an early one. So the tribal group, the early sort of surname appears in the annals, but it's not a hereditary surname until about 980.
Right, so just very quickly, just for anybody that's just literally come in, just the difference between the two, very quickly.
Okay, so surname is just we'll use the patronymic system really quickly. We'll use my own. I'm Michael, my father's Sean, so it would be Michael. I become Michael McSean, and then my son's called Sean, so he's going to be Sean McMichael, and that passes on, and that's a surname, but it's not hereditary because there's no continuation of it.
Gotcha.
But a hereditary surname is that I'm a Doyle, and the fact that because I'm named after my ancestor, and that's been a continuous line for generations of a single.
Gotcha. That's the difference. So that's a later addition of surnames. The hereditary surnames is a later evolving nature of surnames. That's the hereditary one.
Yes.
Perfect. That's brilliant.
And that's the one we sort of look to, because it's the ones we carry today in their more anglicized format. But they're the ones that we are the ones that we normally look at and we go back to. But and after a while you start to get to the wider tribal groups. But as a hereditary surname, it appears the O'Clearys appear in about 980, and they're like I say, arguably the first Irishman, perhaps the first European whose personal name is, I think it's Comilton is the name of the individual, and that's a very anglicized version of his name. But he's the first documented. But there's always a but. The O'Cannons of Ulster are also documented around the same time. Now, they appear in the Chronicum Scotorum, I believe, is the not in the annals, is where they appear, and they appear in 943. And you think to yourself, well, that's earlier than the O'Clearys. So, but this is the problem. The problem we have is we don't have the complete genealogy of the O'Cannons to know whether that is a hereditary surname or just a patronymic surname. So there's a gap between the O'Cannons where we first see the name and then when we finally see their hereditary surname, there is a gap in the records. But like I say, it's art. So there's a bit of an argument there. There's a bit of a debate whether it's the O'Cannons by about 40 years, or if it's the O'Clearys. But the O'Clearys, we have a definitive marker that this is a hereditary surname. But the O'Cannons, like I say, have the claim of possibly, but we just don't have. There's just that little gap in the records that just sort of muddy the water a little bit.
Gotcha. So is this something that kind of comes up? And actually, somebody recently actually asked me a question by DM, and actually it was a Kelly, right? So I'm not giving away anything. There's many Kellys is one of the most popular surnames in Ireland, right? If I'm not mistaken. So he was asking me about, why does my name not have O'Kelly? So this kind of leads into the next part of the development, where I know this probably kind of skips ahead a little bit of time, but just for the sake of simplicity, why did things start getting dropped? What was the first instance of O's and Macs getting dropped? Was this a real later on thing, or did this start happening as the hereditary surnames took hold?
No, so so surnames become formalized in the 16th century, and we start to see them everywhere. Now, there are still segments of Irish society that wouldn't have hereditary surnames in the common sense. So you're a Kerry man, you would know about the O'Sullivan branches in Kerry. A lot of them still use a patronymic system because there's so many O'Sullivans that to distinguish which O'Sullivan is which, because they don't want to be marrying their cousins,
Gotcha.
So they add like a location to the name. So you'd be the O'Sullivan Bantry, or the or they add a color, the O'Sullivan Bui, and so these sort of surnames would exist right up till the 19th century. So our surnames are not just static in that they, our surnames are quite long. That you would have a color attribute or a location or some other defining feature of your closer, smaller family attached to your surname, and that goes up to the 19th century. But the reason they start to get dropped is effectively it's actually as surnames are being formalized and everyone sort of adopted in the 16th century, at the exact same time we're starting to see the dropping of the O's and the Macs, and that's primarily during the Tudor conquest of Ireland.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it has, and that I think that's and that's where you sort of discussed it slightly before about colonialization and stuff, and this is actually where we start to see the colonialization process of Ireland, and one of the things that is taken from the Irish people is their names.
This is actually really interesting, Mícheál, and actually there's something really interesting happening in the chat as well, and I think it's no coincidence. And actually I want to know this as well, because I'm a Brian Boru man, as well as I've already mentioned a million times. So there's two chats, right? Fionnuala and Blahin, right? So Fionnuala said, my father would say to my mother, oh, you've royal blood. Her mother Kennedy and her father Kinsella. Blahin then comes in immediately afterwards. Love to know more about Kennedy. Now, before I let you give it over to you again, Kinetic was Brian Boru's father. So Brian Boru was actually Brian McKinetic, Brian McKennedy in his lifetime. So are those Kennedys related to Brian Boru, or can you explain a little bit more for the ladies that gave the super chat there?
Yeah, so and the Kinsella name is from the Kinshillock, who are a royal dynasty of Leinster. So you know, most Irish surnames are. There's a very famous quote that all Irishmen are descended from kings, and that's because we took most of our surnames from powerful individuals. So, and obviously we had so many regional kings. You would normally take it from your regional ancestor who was a king of a local area or done a great deed, but mostly it's kings that deeds are being written about anyway. You're not going to be Joe the farmer, you know, and having these great deeds, not without if you did create something amazing. If you were Cuchulainn, but actually Cuchulainn wasn't the son of, well, actually Cuchulainn's a great example of somebody who does something great, and then you look at his genealogy. Well, he has to be the son of a god, you know, because he can't just be Joe the farmer. You know, no normal person can just do that, and that's the same with, you know, there's this grafting of, you know, so Joe the farmer may be Joe the farmer, and then suddenly he's actually descended from the Oirgins, you know, because the clerics are putting it in. But anyway, I'm diverging. So the Kennedys, there's actually multiple Kennedy lines, but it does come from Kennetic, and they're all unrelated because, like we've said before, they come from patronymic names from an individual's first personal name. But as we can see today, as a prime example, I am not the only Mícheál on the planet. And every Mícheál is probably having children. So, and that is what's happening in Ireland, is that you've got the Kennetics from County Clare, then you've got the Kennetics from Fermanagh, and then you've got the Kennetics from Galloway in Scotland. And we obviously have the plantations, which brings them across. So there, but if we're just using the Clare branch as the example, if Fionnuala is from Clare or has that connection, yeah, they would be related to Brian, but through their father's line. So his now we've got to be careful with that, because we do know Brian's genealogy. And we do know he had brothers, and we do know
exactly. Yes, so, I think the Kennedy line comes through Mahony's older brother more for some reason. I've looked into this. There's something weird about it. The Kennedys don't necessarily come directly from Brian's line. The O'Briens do, but the Kennedys actually come through one of the brothers' line. Am I right there? I'm pretty sure.
Well, that's a claim again. Just not to put too much of a dampener on it, but I try and say their claimed genealogy, or because we do know, like I've touched on quite a bit about the grafting of genealogies and this linking of trying to be part of a. But I mean, they that's the patronym or the ancestor that the Kennedys claim to be descended from.
Right.
And I always say that, even though I say claimed, I always use that story or that as my narrative, because it's only DNA that's going to disprove it otherwise. So I think whatever the traditional narrative is of a clan is what I go with, unless there's out and out evidence, like the O'Briens not being from the Oirgins, and we know that's a political fabrication. Then I will sort of state that. But so I would say that, you know, I'm not a naysayer for Fionnuala, and I didn't know who the other individual was.
Blahin is a Kennedy as well.
I'm not saying that you're not descended from Kennedy, Brian Bruce's father. But it like I say, a lot of these there's also something you've got to take into consideration too. So I'll use the McCarthys as a really good example. And that all McCarthys of Munster are descended from Carthage from Munster, the king of Munster. Now, but they all adopted the surname. All the branches adopted the surnames at different times. So we have always hang on, wait, I might have gotten this. Now, all the descendants are descended from Cormac Cass, not Cormac Cass.
Cormac Cass is
Owen.
Dalcassians,
Yeah.
yeah.
But they all adopted at different times. So you can have McCarthy, straight line McCarthy, father, son, and then cousins that are taking names of like Kellahan or Kennetig, or and they're for about 5 or 6 generations, even longer. They're the O'Kennedys, they're the O'Callahans, they're all these random names, and then suddenly they become McCarthys because they know in their distant past they were paternally related to the same line as the McCarthys, but at the time it wasn't in their interest to be a McCarthy for whatever reason. But then, as the McCarthys grew and started expanding, and that they decided, well, I am descended from the same guy as the McCarthys, so I'll take on the McCarthy surname because we're from the same line. So it's okay, I'll take it on, and I will get the political protection that comes with that. And that happens all over Ireland. So
gotcha.
This is why when people say that whenever you look at like the Dalcass genetic websites, and there's a lot of forums and groups where they encompass all the Dalcass surnames, and they're like, oh, you're all descended from Cormac Cass, but the names are so just all over the place. And they're like, oh, all us O'Mearas we're descended from Cormac Cass, but we're not related to each other that closely, and it's because probably your family have taken on the surname. They were probably known as something else for generations, and then it became expedient for them to go, actually, I'm an O'Meara because actually you're getting quite powerful and you're encroaching on my land, and I need to prove that we are kin and we are allies. So yeah,
it's complicated like everything else in Irish history. And but something that I want to jump back to before we kind of move on to say like the Norman stuff and how that influenced and I know it's kind of jumping back and forth a little bit, but just about the Mac and the O being dropped, or the O being dropped. What's is there any truth to there is certainly a truth to the fact that people took the soup and dropped the O, but is this like a common? Because, like, say, for instance, that guy asked me, like, was the reason why my name, or I've been told the reason my name is not O'Kelly is because I took the soup. But I also know that my name, Oscuelga, is O Brushnacon, but it's Brosnan. But that doesn't necessarily mean we took the soup. Like, it just means that our name got simplified and anglicized.
So there's a lot of reasons why a family can drop the O and drop the Mac. And part of it is assimilation into the new power that exists, and that can be a out and out show of subservience to this new power, which is the English monarchy and eventual, the British ruling system. Or it can be a passive one of like, I don't want to avoid discrimination, to avoid any sort of harm that can come your way. Also, you've got to remember at the time in the 17th century, from the 15th, actually all through Irish history, but especially during the sort of 17th, 18th, 16th, 17th, 18th century, a lot of religious turmoil, a lot of problems that came with that having that Irish surname might show allegiance to the other side, the enemy rebels, and it may cause harm to your family. So it becomes better just to drop the O in the Mac and form into the system. So taking the soup and becoming, and I think taking the soup tends to more lean towards the famine. Is the term, but it does stem from earlier, or the idea of it, of un-Gaelicizing yourself and becoming more Anglicized. I think it's more problematic because you don't know the individual story of your family member who decided to take that. And sometimes it happened without their knowledge, because a lot of Ireland could not read and write, and their names have been written down by clerks and who are just anglicizing these names, are just writing
that's
down.
such a good point.
So and the thing is, then you get during the 19th century, you get this re-Gaelicization of Ireland. This this nationalistic movement is moving across Europe, of these countries reclaiming lost heritage and shaking off the shackles of colonialism. And it starts to happen in Ireland, where they start to, and a lot of people are starting to put the O's and the Macs back on their name, often erroneously. But also a lot of families started to write these little stories to justify why they think their ancestors did it generations before. And a lot of individuals go, "Oh no, my grandmother said that this is why we did this." And you have to sort of say, "Well, I mean, it's possible, but more than likely that a lot of this stuff was happening. It's so big picture. It's so not in the sphere of the local man. It's such a, it's I suppose if you want to put it into a normal context of someone who's maybe from the UK and Ireland, it's like I consider myself Irish, but every piece of paper that's ever written about me or informal document is dealt with by the British system. It's and every 100 years from now, I'm sure they might look back and go, "Oh, if they have no context of Northern Ireland, Michael was a British person. He probably identified as British." So, and that's effectively the same thing we get with Irish taking
It's
soup.
mental. And interesting. And I think, I probably jumped ahead a little bit there. Sorry, Mícheál, but because I kind of skipped over the Norman influence on Irish surnames, the Anglo-Norman influence, and how did this or they integrate into Gaelic naming customs?
Well, they introduced not new naming conventions so much, but they were undergoing like extensive integration into existing Gaelic customs. So they were for the most part, the Normans kind of assimilated into Gaelic culture, at least on various different levels. Even the ones that, like the Butlers and the Fitzgerald Kildare branch, who are more English leaning, are still on the local political level in Ireland, are still Gaelicizing themselves to a point where they can almost feel secure that they have to play the game a wee bit. It's politics at the end of the day. So obviously we know that the Anglo-Normans come along 1169, invited by Dermot MacMurrough, and they brought with them a range of surnames that Fitz would be very similar to Mac. It derives from the French filius, Latin filius, or French fils, and it means son of. And then you have de, which is like from. So like anyone with the De Burr surname, or De Burka, excuse me, or De Barry. So a lot of these surnames sort of had a similar origin in the sense of that they would translate well into Irish surnames with the Fitz and the Mac, and a lot of Norman families would use them both almost interchangeably, depending, I suppose, on the individual they were talking to or the piece of paper, the individual they were writing to sort of get their point across. Because it's no, Norman politics is, oh, not Norman politics, medieval politics is very symbolic. It's all about, we see it today actually in a lot of polarization, the way politics is polarized, where there's a lot of things about flags, there's a lot of things about, all these symbols, all these things that have meanings, and they're presented. If the president of the United States is doing a speech, he has to do it in front of 5 flags behind him on gold bars, and that's never changed. It's the politics of medieval Ireland. So, but obviously, many Norman settlers obviously were hibernized. They were intermarrying, adopting the Irish language, and this kind of illustrates the social and cultural blending that sort of happens. But the Burrs end up taking on the McWilliams surname, and the Fitzgeralds take on the McGerald surname in certain circles. So how did they we impacted them more than they impacted us in that sense.
But did they bring in the coat of arms? Were they the
No.
ones that brought in that? They weren't.
But yes, but Irish people didn't take coats of arms. There's not a coat of arms for every family that you see today. Most of those are 19th century, 20th century, some adorations. They don't exist in medieval. The earliest coat of arms an Irish family, the earliest coat of arms an Irish family can claim is the Kavanaghs. And that comes from a seal in the late 15th century. So the earliest coat of arms anyone can claim in Ireland is 15th century, which is way past the Norman era. The Normans did bring across coats of arms, or the feudal system brought across coats of arms, because even in the early Normans, it wasn't quite as we would understand it today. The College of Heralds, which is the formal school of, basically writes up the law on what is heraldry, and and that's been amended over time. The laws get changed over time. And again, it goes the same way about surnames, about how the terminology has changed. Well, the coat of arms terminology has changed too. So they brought across coat of arms, but Irish people didn't adopt it in the same way. And if they did adopt it, because it's quite possible that Irish families did sort of look at it and go, "Oh yeah, we were like," there's no proof of it. It's lost to time. There's no evidence.
I'm going to be like pure basic here now. My line of questioning, right? So when we're talking, say for instance, when the I know we kind of, when we say clans, it's, let's just go back to the 9th, 10th century. Let's say the Dalcash are going into battle, right? And they have a banner, right? They have a banner. They have their color, right? They have their flag. I know we don't really have a flag with the Dalcashian symbols. Like, there's been a lot since, and a lot kind of created, but we don't actually have sufficient proof. And then there's this whole kind of influence from the Normans, where they're kind of bringing in their own banners and stuff. Has that anything to do with the kind of the way they would have presented their names later on? Or am I going off on a big tangent here? Like, because I'm just trying to figure out this later edition of the coat of arms and all these different symbols. I'm just wondering, is there any relevance to the earlier evidence of these different clans and stuff?
Yeah, so we do have one mention of a flag design from the Battle of Moira, which is obviously 7th century Ireland, which I believe is a green background with a rampant yellow lion. We know that flags, symbols, things denoting either regimental history or tribal history exist all throughout human history. Every culture has it, some sort of definitive symbol that a group could unite behind, whether that be some kind of totem, religious artifact, whatever. So there's a natural predisposition for humans, especially when it comes to battle or politics, to unite behind a single symbol or a few symbols that are interconnected in some way. And which is why I actually don't, just as much as I say that coats of arms are modern in Ireland, really, is that I still am a big fan of them, because they're a great way for all the Brosnans, all the Doyles to sort of coalesce around a single symbol that you can all identify and sort of get behind. So I am actually a really big supporter of coats of arms, but I just want people to know that they are still quite modern in history. But so yes, those flags existed. I believe the O'Doherty's early flag is mentioned too. We obviously have the Kavanagh coat of arms, which is 15th century, but may have links to an earlier symbol that they were uniting behind. So there was no doubt that whenever Irish armies, before, during, and after the Norman conquest of Ireland, were uniting behind symbols and religious artifacts, and some of those, like Kavanagh's, have made their way into the coats of arms, or some of the ones that we think or we associate with a tribal group have made their way into, like the Red Hand, although the Red Hand again is actually more modern than people realize. But even then, so the Red Hand have also, they adopted that in the 14th century, the O'Neills. But even that, they did it because they were trying to claim Ulster, and to do that, they needed a symbol that represented Ulster, that already had an existence in Ulster, that they could claim as their own and say, "Oh, it's ours." So therefore, if you're a supporter of Ulster, you're a supporter of the O'Neills ruling Ulster, not the de Lacys. So yes, symbols have existed for a long time. Were used in battle. May have ended up on coats of arms for Irish families, but they are not. I think the key point to take from this is they are not recorded. There's not any Irish family having a coat of arms really before the sort of 15th century.
That is absolutely fascinating, and it's really giving my mind a bit of a whirlwind, because it just shows that how symbols and how flags and how banner, all of this stuff has evolved so drastically. Like, for what I would associate with the Brosnan or Brushnaclone clan now may have been the absolute opposite to what was, in existence at that time, if even there was any sort of symbol to symbolize them. You know what I mean? So it just shows you the complexity and the kind of the strangeness of it all. I don't know if that's a good way of putting it, because it feels like the more I talk to you, the more things have really drastically changed century by century. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and they do. Our history is very fluid, and what would be correct. And I'll give you. I had a great talk there. There with Kevin Flanagan at Brehon Academy, and we touched on the Dynasty, the succession rights of families, and obviously, if you see, it's written in Brehon law, and it's written that the Dynasty is the way that a king's succession should take place. But just because it's written that it should take place like that doesn't mean that it did, and in fact, it didn't. Dynasty was the dream ideal of how they wanted succession to happen, but it rarely happened. And it just and the Oonachta are a great example of this, in that the Oonachta had a system where multiple groups within the inner circle of the Oonachta, multiple different branches of the Oonachta, like the Oonachta Lochleen, the Oonachta Rathlin, the Oonachta Cashel, which is McCarthy's or Sullivan's come from. they have this where they alternated, like the Neil, alternated between the kings of these groups, individuals within these groups, elected individuals from these groups. But in the and this starts around the fifth century. But by the 7th century, the Oireachtas Lochlin are like, no, I don't want to share it anymore. So they knock the chessboard off, and they get rid of Tanistry, or this variation of Tanistry or gravel kind succession. And then that paves the way for the Oireachtas Cashel to take the kinship and go, no, I'm not sharing it with anyone. And in fact, the McCarthys have a very long line of father to son inherent instead of this
Yeah.
So it shows. So my point to that is, it shows that that our history isn't static, and that there was also a way that people wanted it to be, and the way that it was is like, it's almost like political idealism and political reality. And that's the case all through history. So but when you get fixated on this idea that, the Irish, we were this and we were that, yeah, we may have been this and that at that specific point, but it didn't stay like that. And it's naive to think that anything stayed static in any part of history. European history is
That's
obviously, for example.
very true, Mícheál. It's a balanced point there, And Ziaf actually mentioned something that's kind of brings me onto a point that I was thinking about when I was researching this, because I never actually heard this before. He's asking about the crests on abbeys and friaries. I'm not too sure if that's 100% related to what we're talking about, but you can tell me. But my question is, leading on from that, is that isn't there some names that get kind of Christianized, like they take on this something to do with the saints and things, certain surnames?
Yeah, so you'll have anything with, like, so you'll Mulholland, or anything with that Mícheál sort of beginning, like Mícheál Shrognall. It's the descent is a follower of an individual, and normally these followers were from families linked to that saint in some way. It wasn't. It was very rare for someone to go, well, do you know what? I like Patrick. He's going to be our family's patron saint, and then suddenly, just adopt that as the surname. Although it did happen, but that's my example. But it's so you would have the Mícheál Shannon. I can't
Yeah,
remember. But
yeah.
and then the families that are associated with I can't even think all the saints at the minute. But what I'm saying is that they were normally earners or corbs of a monastic site, which were hereditary job roles within a church or monastic site. Normally landholding, normally involved in ceremony in some part, normally involved in the running of the church, and sometimes provided the priests for the church, because obviously priests could marry at this time. So you could pass things on through the church for your children. And so normally the patron saint is their founder of the church, as also the founder of the family, or the key figure within who, like I said before, it doesn't always have to be a king who's taken the surname you're taking the surname from. It could also be an influential individual. What's more influential than a saint? So and as for the coats of arms on the churches,
Yeah,
they don't exist on early churches. They
gotcha.
exist on later churches, the coats of arms, and they're normally from individuals, patrons of the saint of the churches, for they've put money towards the church being built. And also during the time period that most of our churches are actually built from, with the coats of arms on them, most of the patrons are of Norman or English stock.
Interesting. We're actually getting through the information nicely here, because I'm on that point now. We're an hour in, right? So I'm going to be selfish. I am actually going to be very selfish now, chat. I'm going to be asking a personal question to Mícheál, and I've been asking him now for a while, and I know, but he's a busy man. So now is my time, because I have him cornered here. And I'm going to ask him about the old Brozhnakon clan and the Brosnan clan, and he's going to be answering me now. He's not going to get away. He's not going to get away from it.
Sorry, the signal's gone. The signal. Yeah.
Oh, imagine. That would be funny.
If you want to hear about it, you have to like and subscribe, Bertie.
I have to send in a super chat to my own to my own live stream, paying myself.
Yes, I know.
Yeah,
you've asked about the old Broshnakon, the great Kerry family, and yes, so they are from Kerry, and I, as far as I can tell in my own research, it doesn't seem to be a name associated with anywhere else. It's a locational name, but they claim. It's a later claim. It's not in any early record. But the later claim is that they descend from the Ciara Lucra, who and they were sort of heir apparents, Tornsters, rulers of Brosna and Castle Island in County Kerry. You might know where those locations are.
I do. We're actually still connected to. I won't say too much where, but I know them quite well. North Kerry, basically. Yeah. North Kerry.
Which is where the Ciara Lucra, we're known for, and so the wider sort of heritage of it is the part of the wider Ciara, and they descend from, in their mythological origins, is they descend from Ciar, son of the Prince of Fergus of Ulster. He's born in Rathcruachan in Roscommon, and this is like early history. This is and then they end up taking over Northern Kerry. But what we do know, what we actually have of the Ciara descendants, the Ciara Lucra, is by like the 7th century, the ruling chieftains of a sub-branch called the Ciara Alti are establishing control over the territory of the Shannon to Tralee. And they're earning the title King of the Cliffs. And the earliest historical record of the Ciara Lucra appears in about 791 AD, when Mícheál Cobh, son of Flanferna, lord of the Ciara Lucra in Kerry, is he's there, but no, I'm getting that mixed up. Mícheál Cobh is son of Flanferna. He's the earliest mentioned, but the Ciara Lucra are mentioned as a family that potentially fought at the Battle of Clontarf.
There we go.
So, which I thought you might be interested in. So anyway, that's the early That's the early. It breaks off into several branches. You have the O'Murters and the O'Connors are the two senior lines of this group, and it would seem that the O'Brosnans are either descended from one of these families or have grafted their genealogy to this one of these ruling families, because that's the way you would sort of do it, basically.
I'll just jump in real quick there as well, just to make something very clear, because people are looking at these maps and they're just wondering, are these like fact and are these current? Like it says here, the Brosnan clan. I have seen this as well, that the Brosnans are associated with actually West Kerry as well. But this is like, I think this is a kind of a later thing, because the Brosnans seem, because like from the Kerry football teams, a lot of Brosnans that played back in the past, they were all kind of from West Kerry, South Kerry. So I think that's a later kind of addition map. But I would just look at these maps as guides. There was one person there getting a bit hung up on the maps. Just look at them as guides. Things are changing all the time. We're just putting them up for a little bit of a illustration versus like this is the absolute fact of the matter. But so sorry to interject there, Mícheál.
No, I get the same questions asked because no map actually there's an in joke amongst historians that maps are the worst thing ever, because the problem is they're so static.
Yeah.
We're trying to reflect such a fluid sort of history. But yeah, like I was saying, the Ciarán broke down into two branches, and Macbeth, son of Murdoch Clean, king of Ciarán, fell at the Battle of Clontarf alongside Brian Broom. So, and obviously they would be your supposed kinsmen. So you do have a connection, a claimed connection to the Battle of Clontarf, which is maybe why you're so interested in it.
And it's interesting because Liam, a legend of the chat for, I know Liam well from Instagram and stuff, and he's bought The Forgotten Prince. And he just said that when you said that about the connection. Everyone watching, make sure you buy a copy of The Forgotten Prince. Closing in on 300 sales. That is about the Battle of Clontarf. Mícheál just confirmed that, no question, no matter, nobody can dispute this now, that my ancestors were at the Battle of Clontarf because Mícheál said it. Let's just, it's done. If you say something on video on a live stream, it means it's true.
Oh yeah.
Sorry, I've interjected twice. I'll let you finish now. Sorry,
No. But I mean, to be fair, that's really it. Your early origins are known well, but whenever we have the surname, obviously, which comes from the descendant of either Brosner but actually it's locational name, and it's one of only I think. It's one of the native Irish locational names are very rare. They do exist all over Ireland, but they are very rare. Because you can have a name that's associated with a locale because your ancestor has given his name to that locale. So you're still got the surname of your ancestor effectively, rather than
interesting
other place. But Brosnan is one of the few, and with it being a locational name, comes into the problem that maybe people are adopting that surname because they're from that place, which means that there's multiple families in that area who are unrelated. And when I say unrelated, by the way, I mean along. Whenever I talk about unrelated families, I'm talking about through the patronymic line, paternal line of father to son, because we know that families are into marrying mothers and daughters and all this sort of thing, and so they are still related, and we're related to everyone in Europe is related if you go back far enough, and you don't even need to go that far back. So when I say not related, I mean in the paternal sense of a direct father to son line. So you may not have, you'll have multiple unrelated families in the area, but they've taken that as a locational surname. But we just don't know, unfortunately.
Are there any other, like, just because I think from my research, there's two other things I wanted to talk to you about before we move on from the Brosnan clan. But just on a I'm just curious, like, what are the other, like, do you know any others at the top of your head of current place name surnames?
I did have a list that I wanted to sort of go through, but the problem was I hadn't time to cross-reference them, so I don't have all. I don't have, but I'm sure we can, if we get a part 2 or thing, I will go through a bit more time to sort of
That's
go
no
through
worries. And yeah, because there was one time, like, this is mad about research, and I tell you, this is one of the major regrets that I have, and it might sound like a small thing to other people, right? But there actually was something that I found years ago, and I never fucking saved it, like, and it was a connection to Carrigafoyle Castle in North Kerry. And it was a document, some sort of document that was saying that the Brosnan clan were connected to this castle, a 15th, 16th century castle. Apparently the Brosnans were working for the lads that were running that. I'm not too sure, was it the
O'Connor Kerrys were the and obviously since they share claimed common descent for the Ciara Lucra, it makes more sense, that you're going to have your kinsmen, and not just for political reasons, not because they're related to you, but you're normally in an area where it's your kinsmen, in the area. If you own, your family tribal group have owned this area for generations, and you're going to hire locals to do jobs within the castle at various levels. You're naturally going to end up having distantly related kinsmen, but obviously the higher up the importance of the job role is, normally the closely related you are to that family.
Very interesting.
If the Brosnan is holding a very high position within the church, within the castle, maybe an administrative role like a steward or something like that, normally that indicates a close relationship to the ruling family.
That's so interesting, and it's like one of my favorite castles in Ireland, Bar Bunratty, because it's just it had this fascinating history around the French. The French they tried to help the Irish at one point, and it was blown up. It was blown up by cannons, and you can still see like the kind of literal hole, the huge massive hole. Like, but you can go up. Anyway, I've digressed a little bit because I could go off on a tangent there, but I did feel a connection to the place, and it's North Kerry, and it's weirdly enough. Now this is just a feeling, right? So it's not fact or anything like that. But I had a feeling that I felt more connected to there than I do from Brosna. I just feel like with Brosna, it just doesn't feel like home, which is weird because when I went there, I must go back and kind of do a proper deep dive into the actual village. There's not much there now. But anyway, I digress a little bit. There's actually a great question that kind of could lead us out of this topic, unless there was anything else you had on that you wanted to mention, or
no, I think we've talked about youth more than enough.
Boulabast, I like it. I love it. That's the kind of crack that the Baru would have been having with the lads up when he was doing his campaigns up the north,
Still salting 1,000 years later.
That's it, I love it. But anyway, we won't go off on that tangent now because I've already done several live streams for hours with Phil from Irish Medieval History about the Baru campaigns into the north. So Peter, who has been a long-term supporter of my work, and he did send a super chat earlier on, he actually has a great question here. And Peter, I think Peter because the Ireland 101, right? You're a teacher on there, isn't it?
Yeah, and we did the talk about the O'Connors, and I don't talk about the O'Connor Kerrys at one stage too. So yeah, I've been in conversation with Peter through WhatsApp and stuff through the time.
Brilliant.
So I'm more than happy to answer his question. He's
a great guy. He's a fantastic guy. Yeah, and I look forward to him coming back because I'm going to be giving him a tour as well because he's been a huge supporter of my work. So, has there been any centralized attempt to record the genetic arising of the same patronymic surnames in different portions of Ireland? Example, all Connors, Concubars. Is it Concubar that how you pronounce it?
No, it's more Concubar is an anglicisation again of Cruaha.
Right.
So it's it's just an anglicization on an anglicization. So
Jesus.
Yeah.
So did you get that question there? Do you want me to repeat it or?
So it's been a centralized attempt to record genetic arising. So I'm going to take that as in like have they tried to test as many O'Connors to find out if there's like a central point for the surname?
And that can apply to any surname, really, like a general overview.
Because we've established that Irish surnames tend to, in the most part, originate the same way. I'm native Irish surnames, so it would be applicable to 90% of the names in Ireland. There are groups such as FTDNA, which are community run, where they try and get as many people to do Y-DNA testing, which is your paternal line, your father's son. So because the Y-DNA is passed down from father to son, so it's a proof of a straight genetic line. And there are these groups like FTDNA that try to link them together and try to match them up with contemporary sources of, so if there's evidence of a surname existing in a specific area, does that name still exist? Are they still are they related to the families that they claim to be related to in earlier sources? And this obviously exists all over the internet. So there's been a real big boost for it in the last sort of 10 years. O'Connor would be one of the, like every Irish surname, there are multiple unrelated lines. O'Connor has up to 10, I believe. Some are, which we'll pass on. We will talk about it briefly. They'll get a mention later. With I'm sure, if we keep talking about surnames, about a branch sort of died out. So you have the O'Connors. The most famous O'Connors are the Ebruin. On that map you've got shown there, where in Roscommon, where the McDermotts are. So centre left. For anyone that doesn't know where Roscommon is. But you have the O'Connors of the Cianachta, which is up where the O'Kanes are. In fact, the O'Kanes took the land off the Cianachta. So, and they're totally unrelated. And then we've just had the O'Connor Kerrys, who we just mentioned as well. So, and then you have the problem as well. You'll also have non-paternal events. So this can be anything from, violence towards women during warfare and the progeny that existed from that, or extramarital, activities that would produce offspring, among others. So it's very hard to do, but I know that there are a lot of individual family projects that do exist, where they are attempting to map as best they can. The problem, one of the biggest problems they need is they prefer to have chiefly lines. So because chiefly lines are obviously recorded better, so there's proof of descent in a paper trail. But a lot of our chiefly lines, we don't know them anymore, for various reasons. So we have the descendants or their cousins, paternal cousins, multiple Ryans, multiple Kellys, and hang on, just thank you. So
all right.
no, just I got a delivery. So but we have no direct link to where they fit in the tree of the great family tree of the Brosnans, Ryans, Kellys. So they tried to find chiefly lines, but like I say, during the Cromwellian invasion, during all the later parts of colonialism, we've lost that link, and the records being destroyed and stuff like that. So, like I say, the small groups exist. There are attempts at it. Businesses have tried to incorporate as many as they can to try and get as many people involved as possible, but it's a long slog.
Interesting. And I'm getting a weird time now as well, so I think we should move on to because we discussed this in advance just to have some sort of structure. We'll move on to the Scottish clans and the difference between the Scottish surnames and how the clan system works here, and to say now I do know the Scots as well. There's a lot of they do come from Gaels and the Picts and stuff, but like there's lots of commonalities, but there is a different system, a different structure, and the names do sound a little bit different, although there's big similarities. So can you just talk about the commonalities and the major differences between the two?
Yeah, I mean, Pictish, Norse, there's also a large part of the kingdom of Northumbria, so Saxon, and these are, and then you have the Gaels. Now these are obviously loose, encompassing terms. What is a Gael? What is a Norseman? What is a Pict? These are large identifying markers that incorporate multiple unrelated people, or peoples, and it's the same way as, like, what's I think about. So whenever you describe whenever the first term of being an Irishman, in early records, it kind of just refers to anyone who can speak Irish, or is from the island of Ireland, and they did one or the other. You were an Irishman, and that was like a medieval concept of that individual. Like the Scotty.
Yeah.
So you have to, like, you have to. So I'm just gonna, like, stamp that in that. Just because you have a Gaelic or originally Gaelic surname doesn't mean that you aren't originally from Pictish descent. This is just how societies move and invasion and everything. But I'm sure we'll sort of kind of touch onto that. So that
You just want to give a shout out to Blaheen as well. She's just given another super chat there, and it just means a lot. So Carmela Mahagut Blaheen. I just really appreciate it. All of that really helps, as you know, Mícheál.
yes.
So just a big shout out there. She didn't even ask anything, but that's just very generous of her. So sorry to interject there, Mícheál.
No, interject whenever
Yeah,
I'll
yeah, go ahead.
happily that I understand that one.
Yeah,
Yeah, so the histories of, like, the history of surnames in Scotland and, like, obviously share this like Celtic origin, again another encompassing term, and yet their development and, like, diverged significantly due to basically a different history. Um, uh, so particularly the nature of, like, Norman influence, and then the subsequent governmental policies that sort of followed with Norman influence. It was totally different in Ireland. There wasn't, like, this one mass sort of Norman invasion. Although I suppose if you want to be really nitpicky about it, 1172 with Henry II, but it didn't really change the political makeup of Ireland. Um, you know, on the local level, it changed very little for a lot of people, but in Scotland, it was a little bit different. Um, so obviously, the adoption of fixed surnames, I think we sort of said, um, happened later, but it was already incorporated within Norman culture by the time they were sort of invited into Scotland by King David. He sort of bringing these, and again, Norman is a loose term again because it can encompass Bretons, Flemish, individuals from Normandy, France. So it's a very encompassing term, but they were coming in to Scotland. Introduction of the feudal system, because King David II was raised in England, and he was very impressed with the feudal system, the centralization of the country, and he wanted to see that for his kingdom when he eventually became King of Scotland. So with that came all the ideas of surnames, and on the implementation of surnames. So the feudal
so
system was a large part of how.
yeah, and the clans. The way clans. Am I right here? Clans will be more synonymous with Scotland, right? But we've had this conversation before, and I'm sure you've heard Phil's take on the clans of Ireland and stuff. Is it more of a Scottish thing to say clans versus an Irish thing?
See, clans, the clans existed. It comes from, well, first thing, it comes from, it means the seed.
Clown, family, is it?
Yes, it's like the seed of, or the family. And
Mm.
this word exists in proto forms all over the Isles and Europe. So the clan system has, not clan system, the clan word and what it kind of incorporates has existed. Well, it exists all over the world, to be fair. And then,
Okay.
you can even go to China and Japan and sort of say this clan, and even
Oh,
though it's a um I think it's a early Brythonic word, really, planet. They most modern people today would understand it. You know, if you type in the Shimazu clan on Google, it'll tell you about the Japanese Shimazu clan, with that word incorporated into it.
Gotcha.
So it's just another way of. So I'm getting hung up on the word. What
Yeah.
it is I think kind of misses so much, because it's just a descriptive word at this stage, you know.
I kind of a comparative there, like, right, it's like when we say Vikings, right?
Mm.
We aren't talking, we are talking about a group of people, but we aren't necessarily calling them Vikings because they were Vikings. It's just a way of labeling the people, so we're not being so complicated. They weren't Vikings. They went Vikinger, right? They were as an activity of like. I'm just trying to say, describe it like the way you're using the word clans is almost it's a way of labeling a situation,
Yeah,
right? And
because
yeah,
I don't want to say about, I don't want to use the term kennel or sill, or, you know, like
yeah,
nerdy, or a clan, because the specific group that use that specific terminology to describe them as selves, as a what, you know, there's up to like 6 or 7 different variations of clan in Ireland, um,
yeah.
which is native to Irish. It's sill, it's kennel, it's, you know, all these sort of wee variations. But then that just gets confusing. So you just
Yes,
end
that's
up
my
saying
point.
clan. And
Yeah,
normally in Ireland traditionally it uses 2 ends, because differentiation of, you know, dialects and stuff. Which so um yeah, so when I say clan, and people get hung up on the, oh, you know, it's a Scottish, yeah, it's just a term that's being used that everyone can understand the
yes.
concept in their brain without having to describe and explain every step along the
Well,
way to get to a point at the end.
that's why I use Viking, because a lot of people say, but they weren't Vikings. But it's like, yes, we know they were Norse, the Norwegians. Yes, we know they were Denmarkians. Yes, we know they were Swedish. But if I go into all of that detail, like, it just loses people completely. And actually,
Yeah.
this made a good. I remember one time I asked, just a little bit of digressing here, but just to really fatten out the point. I remember I was in Bunratty recently, and I remember I had this chat with this lady that was working there in the mansion house, and we kind of talked about how sad it is about that we don't necessarily talk about what was there before, say, the Normans built the castle. We really focus on, you know what I mean, the from the Norman times onwards when the Irish took it over. But then she made a great point. She goes, because if we started incorporating everything, it just would be too complicated, and people's heads would explode. Like, and
Yeah.
that's, you have to simplify and code. You do have to code, like, label everything and code everything, so that we aren't having a big discussion about the actual word and what it really means and the whole complexities of it and the history of it. Like, you can't do that every time you use a word, like, you
Yeah,
know.
I mean, at the same time, with a caveat of understanding that we also know it's problematic to do that too, you know,
Yeah,
because people use that then to sort of push other narratives, simplistic narratives. I always remember,
yeah,
um,
yeah. There's a
I,
there's a there's a flip side to the coin. Yes, I get
yeah,
you. Yeah,
as yeah, like, I always remember it was. So there's obviously early evidence of Brythonic groups in Ireland before the Gael, or before, you know, they arrive about 100 years, 200 years before in Ulster, before the traditional narrative of the Gaels of arriving in Ireland, and there's just like these really kind of, I don't know, I don't want to refer to them in too negatively, but they were using this as evidence that sort of like, well, look, this British tribe is in Ireland before the Irish, so Ireland is British, Ulster is British. And I'm just like, you're convoluting so many different problem things there
yeah,
to try
yeah,
and get to your point. So that, and that's a way in which it can be used negatively against. So yes, encompassing these generic terms is great for an explanation. but at the same time acknowledging that it's also problematic.
Yeah, you do have to describe these things every now and again. Like I do have to put into a comment when I'm referring to Vikings. I do actually have to describe what I mean by that, and telling the audience that I'm not talking about them as a whole ethnic group. They weren't called Vikings. Like, you have to come in and explain yourself. What do you actually mean? But you can't do it every single time. This, I guess, is the point. But you're right. Like people can take these oversimplifications and use them for their own narratives, their own political ideologies and stuff. And I'm totally against that, which I've put out there so many times, because that's the way the world is right now, where it's all trying to pull you into all of these this political spectrum, which is getting more and more divided. And I think Irish history in general is becoming more and more political through a modern lens, and it's getting ridiculous. Like, we're digressing a little bit here, but it is important that we do talk about this, because obviously you're probably seeing this yourself, that when you're talking about this stuff, it is trying to draw you into those debates or oversimplify something for their own gain.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, that example is the prime example, because obviously I studied that area. I know the history. I know that these Brittonic groups were in Ireland, and but you're using a discussion from basically the 3rd century, a talking point from the 3rd century, all the oversimplifications for 2,000 years to make a point about politics today. It's irrelevant.
It's madness. It's complete madness.
If your point goes back to the 3rd century, you've actually lost the point somewhere in those 2,000 years.
And you actually already talked about this earlier on, when you actually did say this was happening then, like it, but the mechanics of symbolism, the mechanics of oversimplification and labeling and stuff like that, for the gain of the court, or for the gain of the suitors or the enemies, or for against the enemies, blah blah blah. That was used then, but the context was totally different in terms of what they were actually trying to gain out of it. Like, you know what I mean? In terms of the actual immediate here and now then. So if we're using those same methods to gain something from now, but you're talking about the context of 2,000 years ago, it's insanity. It's insanity, like, but it's happening more and more. It's crazy how the comments, and I know I'm digressing, but it's important to talk about this as well, because I have mentioned this. I wanted to do a video on this, but I said, nah, I'm not going to throw the pearls to swine as such, like, where don't give them what they want, but maybe just a little bit, just to say that more and more, the more you talk about this kind of stuff, and maybe you can give your thoughts a little bit more on this, but I'm noticing that it's getting super divisive in the comment section. Like, no matter what you make a video about, like anything.
Yeah, my problem seems to be, I suppose I'm doing surnames, so it becomes more focused. Then I had to clear up about someone calling someone with a Norman surname a colonizer, and then this narrative of like not having a native Irish name, so you're not Irish. That I was kind of like, well, considering that in our early form, what was an Irishman? If it's someone who spoke Irish, well, a lot of us don't. I don't speak Irish. I've very a small amount of it, so I automatically am excluded from being an Irishman, even though my family have been here for thousands of years. So I think these, and I think Dr. Cormac McSporn he put a post, not a post. He was in a comment section one time, and I kind of touched on it as before. It's like whenever we're talking about Scotland and the Gaels and the Picts and the North and the Saxon, it's like, well, what is a Saxon? What is a Gael? What is and it's really just, it comes down to sort of not only your interpretation of what a Gael is, but also the world's interpretation, because we gained the name Ireland and being called Irish because we were given that name first. We didn't just make it up for ourselves. We were given it first, and then we adopted it. So that how the world views you also has an impact on the identity as well. So which just adds another layer, which I think a lot of people just are not willing to doubt. discuss.
It was a ridiculous comment there. I got on because of my brand Invasion Island, which is the story world brand that I'm creating, and then have the tours, and that's where the book comes from. And they're like, "Why didn't you call it Invasion of Ireland?" And I was like, because this sounds dumb, like,
Yeah.
it's my business. But like, it's like if you're going down that route, like you just said, Ireland, the actual name Ireland, when did that come into existence? Because that our name was completely different many times over, depending on the perspective of who you're talking about. Like, are you talking about from the Roman perspective, from the British perspective, the Greek perspective, our perspective? Do we even really know what we actually called ourselves?
Well, we called ourselves by our. We assume we called ourselves by our tribal groupings. You know.
There you go. But
Even
as an island.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so that probably came much later on, like in terms of us calling ourselves as an actual full island and referring to ourselves in that way. When did that actually happen? Like,
I like to use as well that we had the laws put in place, and whenever they found out the Anglo-Normans were becoming more Gaelic, more Irish than the Irish themselves, and even using the term Gael and Irish interchangeable could be a little bit problematic because we're not really Gaels in this day, and the same way that we would have been couple hundred years ago, but they're looking at these Anglo-Normans going, you're dressing like them, you're speaking like them, you're riding horses like them, you're doing all these things like a Gael, so we're going to put these laws to stop them, and then that just really puts another layer into perspective. It's just like, well, how much of those things do I dress like an Irishman? No, I dress like a Western European. In fact, I dress like a more, I suppose, more influenced by America these days. And do I speak? Well, I speak like an Englishman. I English is my first language. I don't really ride horses, but the point is that if you were to nitpick down these things to what is encompasses your cultural identity, it's so influenced all over the world and then for people to claim, well, you're not Irish because you weren't born here or whatever. And I don't want to go too deep into the polarization of that. But what I'm trying to say is that because you weren't born here, and I know people who weren't born here who speak far better Irish than me, almost fluently, and I'm like, well, you're already passing more hoops than I am, so it's just and then genetics is just a crazy one for me, considering the makeup of human nature and human history, and but like I say, without going, if we go down here, we could end up upsetting a lot of people.
We can, and you know what? It's nice to be, because we are kind of coming up towards the end of the time, so we may have to organize a part 2, Mícheál, like because I feel like we're starting to stretch ourselves a little bit. What would you be up for doing a part 2, like because we could finish up with a couple of like easy ones. And maybe take some questions and then leave it and maybe organize a part 2. Would you be up for it?
Definitely. Well, yeah. Well, I'm always up for it, Bertie. Anytime you just let me know. And
again, there's no pressure, like, because the thing is, we do have like I mean, if you want to like fly through them, we can fly through them. I mean, are you feeling up for it? Like, if we kind of spitball them, or would you prefer to come back?
No, well, I mean, part of me thinks if we spitball through them, the next topic could be more tailored towards whatever the people want. They might not want a part 2 because they're already here for this, but
we can spitball, but we'd have to get through quick, because I kind of have to wrap it up soon enough. That's the only thing. I don't want to rush you, like, you know what I mean? Sure, look,
Yeah,
we'll see
I'm a
how we get on.
waffler. That's the problem. I need Russian.
No, I don't like doing that. So look, okay, look, we'll see how we get on, right? We'll see how we get on. I think people are always up for part 2 and 3. That's why you have like Rambo Second Blood, like, and Third Blood and stuff like that. You know, they mightn't
Yeah.
be as good, but they certainly make the money, like, you know. Anyway, okay, what's the next? So we were basically finishing up on the clans of Scotland, right? So that leads us into
I don't
oh
even know if you
yes,
answered that.
that
We
that's
kind of
my
well.
point. You see, I'm kind of wondering. Yeah, that's kind of my point. You know, so there is a kind of quite a few questions left. But okay, just so we kind of sum up that question there, or finish that question, or the answer.
Well, hang on. I don't mean to, Bertie. Actually, you might be better to do a separate chat for Scotland
Yeah.
for a new
Okay.
video, and that way you're
That
not
could be.
conflating the two, and we're not rushing a whole. What we've spent an hour and 40 minutes doing for Ireland, we're giving 15 minutes to another country is probably doing it a bit of an injustice.
Yeah, and you know what? That actually might be cool, because what I could do, right, is that just so we're not going, it wouldn't really make too much sense just to do a video solely on Scotland, but actually do it from the perspective of Dalriada, you know, Dalriada, leading into that whole thing. You know, would that make sense to you? Like, in even the fact that Brian Boru called himself Emperor of the Scoti, like, and how
Yeah,
that
I
all
mean,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, I look forward to upsetting a few people about the Doriat.
Well, look, I mean, at the end of the day, apparently we invaded Britain just like the British invaded us. Apparently, to some people, like, you know what I mean. That's basically, we colonized Scotland the exact same way as the Brit, and it was payback. That's what I
Yeah.
was being told. It's payback.
Well, I'll leave you the note here. No.
Exactly, I know. But anyway, look, Shane Brady, who is the adjudicator of the chat, is basically said he would love a part 2. So, Mícheál, I'm sorry. I think that unfortunately you're signed up for a part 2. I'm sorry.
I should have read the contract before I signed it.
Should have read it. Should have read it. Shane Brady, who I didn't just meet tonight on the chat, is basically, I'm sorry, but he's the man that has the answers to everything, and he said that we're part 2 is in order. Okay, let's get through these. Are there noticeable surname pattern? Did you kind of get a time to look into this? Where is there any sort of differences between the actual provinces of Ireland and how they do surnames?
No.
Yeah.
All of them. Well, I mean, there are. What we have is in the 1400s, the Gaelic language starts, or the Gaeilge Irish. It starts to diverge into your Ulster, Munster, Leinster branches, separate. So it leaves Old Irish, and you start to get these dialects, and Gaelic in Scotland too. So what we start to see is surnames become more localized in that way, in their spelling, for a similar surname. So I'll just use an example, but it's not 100% right, but it would just give people a clear image, is that Murphy, Murrah, and Murray are all from the same sort of name, and they're all interchangeable. And these sort of things can be impacted on where you are in Connacht, Ulster, Leinster, Munster, Scotland, and it would change how. So you could tell that in that sense, and how the spelling was, their understanding, that the way that they maybe said the word white or a color or something, it would impact the surname. But in the same sense, a lot of that got smashed with the when during the colonialization and the anglicization of surnames, where you ended up with surnames that were completely different, actually becoming the same name, which is why you'll have Murphys all over the west coast of Ireland, and some of those might never have been Murphy. Same with McCarthy. Some of them may have been Kerr, some of them may have been O'Carthaig, you know. So it kind of gets a bit messy. There is an individual, though, who I had the name in my head. He does genetic research on Ireland, and he focuses primarily on surnames and the like the
Is that
genetics.
John
No,
Grenham, Patrick
no, no,
Wolf,
no,
Edward?
no,
None of
no,
them.
no, no, not the list. That the
Yeah,
it's it's gonna annoy me. He's
bring it up for
I-
part 2.
yeah, no. So anyway, he does a lot of genetic research around. I could see a symbol and everything. It's absolutely raging me. But he does a lot of genetics. I don't agree with a lot of his research. But I do love what I do love about his work is his mapping of surnames, and he has mapped surnames due to like certain colors and where they use specific wording, and he's done this all over Ireland. And it's some excellent work, which is just really annoying me that I can't think of.
No worries. But I'm gonna have I'm gonna have to push on because I definitely want to get the last
Yeah.
few questions in because they're the kind of popular ones as well. Like so, just on that topic about the Gaeltachts as well. It's interesting how they resisted the changes the most. Is there anything that you would like to? Is that true? First of all, and is there anything you would like to add to that?
Sorry, say that question again.
So the Gaeltachts and how
Gaeltacht.
they resisted the change to their surnames. Is that true? And would you like to add anything to that?
So there's evidence in a lot of areas about the resistance to name change, but again, it's when you look at local level and at the administrative level. So on an administrative level of the government, they didn't avoid the Anglicization or colonialization, but on a local level they did. But that happened all over Ireland. Obviously, Ulster was heavily impacted by the plantation, and the fact that it was the way that it was planted was to incorporate heavily centralization into small administrative roles that could heavily monitor and police basically every aspect of that province. Whereas there are areas in Ireland, in the modern day Republic of Ireland, or just Ireland, whatever, where there were areas that were outside the sphere of Anglo influence, even right up until the 19th century. But then we have the famine, which kind of really tore down some of that framework as well, where they needed to anglicize. So these areas went through a typical ebb and flow and were able to maintain more of an essence of the traditional Gaelic structure, naming structures, but they weren't completely resistant to it. And I guess it's just some people would call it modernization. But like I sort of referred to it earlier with the O'Sullivans in modern day Kerry, how they've managed to retain an early part of Gaelic surnames that don't exist in the rest of Ireland almost.
Yeah.
But we know Kerry was heavily influenced by Normans and plantations from the Cromwellian invasions and stuff. So it just shows. But yes and no.
Yeah, no, that's it. And so a lot of people would want to know this. What are the most common Irish surnames today, and how far back do they go? If you have any few.
So to be fair, all the common surnames go back to the surprising. I always thought it was surprising that the oldest surnames aren't the most numerous. Which you would think, because they've been around longer, they would have more genetic footprint, I suppose would be the word to use, but they don't, because all the names like Murphy, Kelly, O'Sullivan, Walsh, Ryan, O'Connor, O'Neill, Doyle, Byrne, McCarthy, they're all the most common, and they're all written there right in front of you too, which is they're all not full-on latecomers to the naming process, but they are all late. None of them are 10th century names. They're all coming in to formation in the 11th century, mostly 12th century. So, which is, I thought you would think is surprising, like I say, because you would think the older surname would have more time to populate and produce. And now that can come down to, again, how our name structure has been heavily impacted by our history. And the fact that there isn't one McCarthy line, there's multiple that have just been anglicized to McCarthy. And same with O'Connor, and same again with O'Connor. There being multiple unrelated branches.
Interesting, and that leads us in then to kind of, I'm conflating two things here, where two questions, where what is, in your opinion, if you have one, rare common sorry, what am I on about? This is the 2 hour into the live stream, my head's not even working. What is a rare current surname that fascinates you? And also, are there any surnames that have completely died out with any interesting stories? Like, so if you have anything at all on that.
Yeah, so well, I mean, there's a few. So I think the most interesting one is, for me, is more of a anglicization and but I will name, like, so there are names that existed that have done. In fact, there's been a steady decline of surnames for centuries. Obviously, it's just a natural progression of surnames do die out. For a multitude of reasons, like we've just all discussed anyway, with colonialization, anglicization of wording, and centralization of the governments, etc. All the stuff we've kind of pointed. But there were some names like the O'Bricks of the Corkle, who were part of the Lordship of Dacia. So they're down where that Whelan is. They would be related to the Whelans. They're a name that sort of have died out. There's another one, the O'Shosta, which is like it's been suggested to be the original form of the modern O'Shea's, because it's found in O'Shea area, and people are undecided. It's in the Desmond Survey in 1587. I think it's the last time it's sort of written as O'Shosta. But they're undecided if it died out or if it just got assimilated into the O'Shea's, or if they were just two branches of the same O'Shea's with just different variations of their name. So and we've already talked about the O'Mellalins, or now the McLaughlins, from the email Shocknell, or email Shocklin, sorry. Obviously the Westmeath family, who from the High King of Ireland, that you would reference so often in your stories. Their name is now McLaughlin in its anglicized form, but I think they're an interesting one on how they've lost their sort of original name format, and the fact that they went through several stages of anglicization, and that the original anglicization is pretty much disappeared.
A quick question there from Fanula, because she's been a big supporter as well. Is Presley I'll put it up here. Is Presley a Scottish surname? Just quickly, just so we can move on.
Yeah. Presley's associated with Scotland. I think there might be an association with England too, but it's not a native name to Ireland.
I did not know that about being a Scottish name. So does that mean, is that Elvis surnames? Is it spelled like that, or is there one S?
I don't know about Elvis Presley.
I don't know. Yeah, probably is. He's probably Irish if you go back far enough.
I mean, the thing is, there may be Irish Presleys that exist. Like I say, with the topics we've discussed on how the surname form, but for I believe Presley is a location associated with Scotland. It's definitely associated with Scotland.
Cool. So listen, I'm going to just give a little bit of a wrap up to this. We got about 15 minutes tops, right? So I'm just going to give a bit of an overview of how part 2 will go, and whenever it happens, and there's no pressure at all, Mícheál, okay? So what we'll do is, because we kind of skipped over a bit of the Viking stuff, so what we could do next time is we could actually incorporate Ireland, the Kingdom of the Isles, Scotland. talk about the Viking influence overall, Scotland and Ireland. We can lead it into from the Dalriada into that and into the Scotland maybe as a part two. Does that sound like a cool like timeline for the part two?
Well, I think it does with the fact that how integrated the Viking world was between it was our not only was the Gaelic world a bridge between the two worlds, but the Viking world was a bridge
Yeah,
between Scotland and Ireland. So it would be I think it would be very good. Also, with the fact that it might be worth we might even tie it into how much of your love with Brian Brew and we could look at maybe something to do with the Mormers of Moray
yeah.
and their link to that sort of thing too. Because so there's plenty of ways we can bridge the gap.
It sounds pretty good to me because that is something, because like even at the Battle of Clontarf, as we know very well, the Scots, the Mars, wasn't it? Did you just mention them? They fought the Battle of Clontarf, right?
The Mormers, so there's mentioned, there's in a brief extract there is said to be 10. I think 10 are mentioned, but only one individual is mentioned. And the problem with that is that it's because he died. So
Yeah.
that's why he's mentioned.
Mm.
Whereas
Yeah.
the others are said not to. So, but yeah, I mean, Mormer, so we don't know how many were actually there. I do name some of the names that are found in that location of Moray.
Mm.
And Moray also, very interestingly, has a long history of with their kingship claiming Irish descent. And it was part of their legitimization is that they had to have their ancestors had to have come from Ireland. So it's there's a lot of ways we can sort of bridge that.
Absolutely. So we're going to start wrapping this up. We've 15 minutes left. If anyone wants to get a quick super chat in to ask about their family name, this is the time to do it because we have to finish at 7:15. So the last question I'm going to give you before kind of we can wrap up with us, like, just talking, doing the outro. What are the biggest misconceptions people have about Irish surnames? What are the biggest misconceptions you come across in your work?
That Muck is Irish and Mac is Scottish. They're both interchangeable. Although Muck is found more in Ireland than Scotland, and Mac is found more in Scotland than Ireland. It doesn't denote heritage. If you have the surname Muck Michael or Mac Michael, it does not denote where your ancestors are from. So if you're Muck Michael, you're not going to be. There's not 100% certainty that your family are going to descend from Ireland, and the same with Mac, descend from Scotland. And it doesn't denote religious background either of your ancestors. It's an oversimplified myth based on half truths. Like I say, the fact that they're found more in one location than the other, but it doesn't denote any of that. The Muck is not Irish, Mac is not Scottish. They're both
Excellent.
interchangeable.
And as well, I know I've been saying part two all the time. Actually, we're just going to do like a separate stream for the next one, just because my head is a little bit messed up from the stream now. Because like Mícheál knows this too well. When you do a stream for hours, you start getting very cloudy in your mind. So the next stream will be a separate thing, but obviously in theme with this one that we're expanding on some of the things that we talked about. So if people want to research their Irish surname history, what are the best resources in your opinion, Mícheál?
So I think the best free, well, he's kind of free. You can get a couple of searches on him. Is John Grenham, or John Grenham. His stuff is fantastic. He's
I'm going to write his name in, John Grenham. Yeah.
Yeah, he has a lot of work, a lot of mapping work, and he's a good introduction into your surnames. He again does simplify and grouping some families together, or oversimplifies one branch, and but you can forgive him for the amount of information that has to be put out there. That sometimes you just need to get some of it out. So, but his work is fantastic. And I would say if you want to start reading about it, he's a good place to start. Tie that in with, I didn't tell you about this before because the Library Ireland is good.
National Library of Ireland, yeah?
No, not the National. The Library Ireland is a website.
Ah, yeah. Yeah, I know the
And
one, yeah.
they're good. Again, these are introduction levels. This is just like you're
Yeah,
sort of like your if you're just interested and want to Google your name and want reliable enough that it's not going to take you down the realms of complete fantasy. So
yeah,
they're good. If you want to start, any like historians that sort of cover the sort of surnames, I would say about Patrick Wolfe and probably the OG, the GOAT, Edward McLysaght. They are, again, not everything we have studied their works later and find out there are obviously errors. But again, really good place to start and get an understanding. And then if you want to go just that little bit further back and really get an idea of like how we talked about very early on in the chat about the O'Clearys and their appearing in the annals and, their place in history and in the things that were happening in history, I would go to celt.ucc.
yeah.
All the annals are on there. Loads of manuscripts, all have been translated into English, where you can sort of read where your names pop up. Is a great way to sort of see the again. Don't take it for complete beta,
Mm.
but all of it is just a really good to help give you an understanding. You've got to remember the annals were written for political reasons as well. So the best example I always use is that there was in the 16th century during the Tudor conquest of Ireland, in the annals it'll say about how the O'Donnell won a great battle against the English. He wasn't even at the battle. It was his second in command who won the battle. So
Oh,
so
there
you
you
just
go.
have to get that. You just have to get that sort of.
Yeah. And also as well, Mícheál is being very humble because he's not mentioning himself as a person to follow and to watch all his videos on his YouTube channel, Clans and Dynasties, and his TikTok, Clans and Dynasties, that he does lots of live streams on, and actually lots of short content on there that's definitely going to be invaluable to your research as well. The last bit as well, and as well, I totally agree. Again, you kind of have to do like a huge amount of research into all of the mainstream sources. I actually do like to look at alternative researchers as well, just to give myself an idea of what other people are theorizing. Because even if they're talking absolute complete nonsense, there's always things of truth that you can take, even from people that are you know, chastised by the mainstream industry of research. But mainstream sources and primary sources and secondary like the good validated ones are the way to go. But if you're going to just read the annals of the Four Masters, for instance, and then don't read anyone else, like you're going to be lost. Like you don't really know what's going on. You have to give yourself a bigger context, like a bigger spectrum of ones that I actually like. A big resource that I do, and it's available to anyone. It's got all JSTOR and all of these colleges around the world. They all have open libraries, like, and academia.edu. You could just join with a free profile and search any academic article and read it online for free.
Oh
And
yeah,
if
I
you
would
want,
highly recommend.
yeah,
I've got a lot of sources that I refer, a lot of individuals that I reference. A lot of my work. My favorite historian is Dr. Paul McCarter. He would be a main reference in of a source for most of my work. And then there's Luke McInerney. He's another individual that sort of touches on surnames, and he's another absolute fantastic source. So yeah, academia.
Edu.
Academia is a great site.
It's brilliant. It's brilliant. It's fantastic. Yeah, sorry, Mícheál. Were you saying something there, Mícheál? Did I cut across you again?
I was just nodding along. So like, yeah.
Sorry.
I can't recommend it enough. So, but yeah, if you're looking academics, I can't. Dr. Paul McCotter, he's got a book, Territorial History of Ireland. It's a really heavy read. I will say, if you aren't into heavy academic materials, I probably would not recommend it. But it is a great and valuable resource.
And we're going to just finish up on the last question, just not surname research, but actually researching your Irish roots, genealogical. Do you have anything to say on that at all? Or
so again, there's a lot of great content creators out there sort of going along this route at the minute as well. There's so I would say we've got a lot of things being opened up with kind of every year you've unlocked another year that we can research back. Irish history is problematic. Most genealogists will agree with that. But I will say that clan websites, if the family has a clan website, engage with it. A lot of these people are heavily involved in their own family researches, and they spend hours and spend thousands of pounds doing the research, trying to get people together. So I would say if your family has a clan page of any kind, look to engage with that.
that's a very good point, actually. Yeah,
this is only going to go. A lot of the connections people make are from speaking to people who maybe know a little bit more and they didn't realize. So
exactly, that's fantastic. Listen, sorry, I know that I'm kind of like trying to wrap it up, but I am under pressure for time. I just want to say, Gora Mila Ma Gwiv Guillermo Corja, thank you so much for everyone that has showed up, has left a comment. And sorry, we can't answer everything. It's just impossible to answer all the comments. It's just there was a lot of commenting tonight, which was amazing. It's really good. Appreciate it. People that have stayed the whole time. Adam, for instance, I know Maria has been in. There's been Daniel, so there's been a bunch of people commenting. They've been here the whole time. Gerard is commenting very valuable information there as well. Thanks, Gerard. But anyone, thanks so much. But most of all, I have to thank Mícheál for giving me his time, giving us his time, 2 hours and 15 minutes, and he's already signed the contract to do the follow-up.
The sequel.
The sequel, which is going to be completely and utterly a new. It's not part 2 anymore. We've changed the game. We're not doing part 2s. We're doing a whole separate thing. And Gavinci Baru just said something there that you can rewatch this. You can anyone that wants to just listen back if they're going to work or something, just as like a podcast type of thing. I'm pretty sure it'll be. I'm going to do it because it's different when you're doing hosting. I actually always will listen back a day or two later just to hear the information properly. But anyway, Mícheál, any last words? Any final things you want to say? Any advice? Any last bits of advice to anyone, or any and plug everything that you want to plug as well. Don't be too humble about it as well.
No, I mean, like I say, that subscribe, to my own stuff. That'd be great. And if you have any questions, I do get a lot of questions. Obviously, it's quite a lot of people are very interested in it. But I do have members programs that are affordable that I always prioritize members questions, and I will happily answer any members questions. So if you want to have a look at that, to reach out to me, but don't feel you have to pay for anything. If you put it in, I will try and get to it eventually. So, but check me out, and hopefully you've had a fun time listening to me and waffle away for 2 hours.
Well, I don't see this. I'm not saying this just to blow smoke, right? But if you are genuinely interested and you do want to actually bypass a lot of that research, like, you know, if you don't have the time, a few euros to Mícheál and get in there and get a bit of information. I mean, I've often done that with different courses and memberships and things like that. Just pop in, get a bit of information, head back off again, or stay for a few months. You know what I mean? There's no harm. So make sure you get over to Clans and Dynasties on YouTube and on TikTok and sign up if you can, if you want that information. And if not, there's plenty of content up there already. I've learned a lot from Mícheál's content. So yeah, look, Mícheál, thanks so much. And we're definitely going to come back on and do another one. As we said earlier on, we're going to go from the kind of Dalriada Viking Kingdom of the Isles connection with Scotland, and we're going to talk about all that intricate details of the surnames and the clans and how that all intertwined, the differences of Scotland and Ireland, and focus a bit more on Scotland as well, and those interesting islands all the way up, you know what I mean, and how the Vikings interacted and stuff like that. So that'll be the next time. So whenever that happens, that happens. So make sure you're subscribed, hit the notification bell. If you never want to miss a notification about my live streams, make sure you sign to my my mailing list. And I always send an email beforehand so that you can, you know, not forget to come on and see the live show. Anyway, Gora Mila Mahagwiv, Guillermo Corja, and thank you, Mícheál, as well. Slán Gafol, Slán Awalya, everyone. We're going to end it now, yeah?